There has recently been an explosion of drama involving Justin Roiland and his involvement in Adult Swim and Squanch games. This comes right on the heels of the recent allegations against him. However, I am not touching that can of worms in my review. My focus is on the game itself, as that is where my interest is. December 14th rolls around and it is a great day. We're moving into the holidays, we have nice weather, and finally High on Life comes to Game Pass. I load up the game with high anticipations as I have really been looking forward to playing the game since the announcement. We're off to a good start, but the novelty wears off and I gradually found myself losing interest quite quickly. And although the game has its flaws, the reviews seem to be very positive. So why is my conclusion different to the general consensus? To give some background, High on Life was developed by Squanch Games, the company created by Justin Roiland, and it shares a lot of similar qualities to the other projects Justin Roiland was involved in. It excels at the unexpected and has the same verbal diarrhea style of dialogue. So it is without doubt true to form, but it is true to form at its own expense. Justin Roiland has been one of the core players in the development of a few projects like Rick and Morty and Solar Opposite. And because of the monumental success of those projects, High on Life lives and dies by his reputation and our expectations of what a project would be when he gets involved. There are some great scripted moments, like the voice acting is excellent, unique antagonists, and a compelling plot, but it's all ultimately quite underwhelming. These standout elements of High on Life that I enjoyed and feel to be its winning traits are those most true to form, as if they were plucked verbatim from the archives of ideas that didn't quite make it into his other project. While there is certainly Roiland-esque spice sprinkled into the mix to add some flavor, the game does feel somewhat watered down in comparison. This is where the tricky part comes in, because how do you accurately capture or create a universe with the same breadth of scope than his previous endeavors within a game, especially one that is developed by a relatively new to the gaming industry company? You can make the valid argument that High on Life should be seen and appreciated in isolation, but is that really how people think? Can you pick something off a menu without reading the ingredients first? Or watch a trailer and not build an expectation of what a bear on cocaine might actually be like and the chaos that unfolds because of it? Building an expectation is just the natural response. Even more so, being familiar with the past work of someone that has a very unique and very stylized approach when creating a world or writing a scene. It's the same principle with High on Life. Just knowing that this is the first, more ambitious project from Squanch Games already set in motion the building of my expectations. Knowing that Justin Roiland is the one pulling the levers and pressing the buttons does set the framework for your expectations. I had the expectation for unbridled creativity and the knack for doing something unexpected, which we have become accustomed to from all his prior creations. That is the load bearing pillar this game was built around, and whether that pillar can carry the weight of your expectations will ultimately determine your conclusion, whether that be for better or for worse. From a game design perspective, High Life stands in stark contrast to itself. Certain elements are bare bones and others are meaty enough to sink your teeth into. The combat encounters encapsulate this particularly well when comparing the bland enemy designs to the excellent array of weapon choices. Within the first 30 to 60 minutes, you have essentially encountered the majority of the enemies the game has to offer. They'll throw in a shield enemy or sniper here and there and someone else rushing you down for some close company, but they were far and few between and never really carried enough weight to force me to change my approach. In almost all encounters, taking the high ground and mowing down everyone from there is the go-to, and there is little to no incentive to change positioning or tactic because of the way the enemies are designed. Your enemies are essentially just fodder for you to burn through and move on to the next encounter. It's a very rinse and repeat structure. This is in contrast to the variety of excellent and well thought out weapons you pick up along the way, carrying the combat encounters while keeping you company. Your weapons are known as Gatlians, an alien race of weapons whose home planet was destroyed by the very same cartel you're having to deal with now. They honestly stole the show. I am a sucker for having a companion to run rampant with. In Borderlands, I would opt for the Beastmaster, or Path of Exile, I'm picking the Summoner. In High on Life, your guns fill the need for that companionship while having an endless supply of ammo for your itchy trigger finger. It is a win-win. You start off the game with Kenny, the simple introductory Gatlian. just to get you familiar with the shooting mechanics. Primary fire, straightforward shooting, with a stronger secondary ability which has a cooldown. After you kill the first boss, you get Gus, the shotgun equivalent of the Gatlians, with a secondary ability of a disc that rampages and tears through enemy forces, ricocheting between them before returning to you, which you can then deflect back with your melee weapon for another go. This to and fro chemistry between your guns and knife is a stroke of brilliance. Even though the guns are well designed and satisfying to use, there's not really any tactical incentive to swap between the different Gatlians to approach any encounter. You rarely get flanked or rushed, and this leads to quite a lot of stale encounters throughout the roughly 10-hour gameplay. Enemies didn't seem to have any apparent weakness for one or the other. You could run through all the game's combat encounters without ever really needing to change your approach or weapon. The combat is the bread and butter. The aim is for these elements to be complementary, but you end up having a warm out of the oven slice of bread only to be smothered in some cheap spread with a disappointing aftertaste. The only incentive to swap between the different options was out of whim, based on what character complemented your playstyle the most, or just because you wanted to. I would have liked a structure where I needed to swap mid-combat to counter an enemy or turn the tables to be able to play more strategic. There are some upgrades for your weapons and equipment, and although you're not spoiled for choice, they did make a welcome addition. The world and map design, similar to the combat, has its ups and downs. You start off the game in your house, which quickly gets teleported to another planet once you're in the thick of things. And stepping out of your warp tiles into the middle of this city center is probably the most awestruck any map had me during my playthrough. The bright luminescent signs, weird inhabitants, and odd conversations. It's a familiar city center setting with just enough novelty nestled in to drive your curiosity. I enjoyed exploring the nooks and crannies of the world to find loot and some very odd comic books scattered throughout. But with some exceptions, of course, the world and level didn't really feel lived in. Generally, they mostly felt like they were a platform for the combat encounters to take place and to give you some eye candy while you explore. Admittedly, this is subjective. This is where the creative pillar started to groan under the weight of my expectations, especially considering some out-of-the-box, bustling worlds we've seen in Rick and Morty. A forest with different colored trees and waterfalls and a dusty saloon town just doesn't reach the same heights of what I was hoping to experience. This is unfortunate as it does curb your adventurous side, which would result in you missing out on some odd and entertaining characters or loot to be found in the world. There are some memorable characters the average player would unfortunately miss out on. Luckily, the majority of the quirky cast is woven into the main story of the game, so it's not a deal breaker, but it is unfortunate. There are some gems hidden in the world. The Mac and Cheese brothers and their daddy issues, or the shady black market character that wants you to buy his jars of alien fluid for whatever reason. There's a plethora of secrets to find. I didn't find a lot of the secrets throughout my playthrough, however, I've seen a lot of videos about some hidden interactions, towns, and secret bases. And if you're not the one to spend the time looking for them in-game, I would definitely suggest you go and watch a few videos, as these secrets definitely increased my appreciation for the game, even if I wasn't the one to find them. The plot is rather simple yet surprisingly effective. An extraterrestrial cartel wants to harvest humans as a strong hallucinogenic drug that's the new space LSD. The plot's effectiveness resides in the fact that it's simultaneously comedic but also eerie and dark. The best example of this is while you're at a high-end spa in the desert where people are being consumed as drugs by these gargantuan aliens. The host cracks a joke about the variety of experiences you typically associate with substances and how the variety of humans based on age or other characteristics elicit these different responses. It really drives home the uneasy feeling of expendability towards people just being an object, being kept in cages, and used as an expensive pastime. This is a theme Justin Roiland seems to use quite often in his stories, with Rick and Morty having infinite universes, so killing off one character, it's not a big deal. My biggest gripe with the plot is the pacing. The main story is given within the first few minutes and then falls into hibernation until pretty much the end. There are some twists and subplots throughout the game, like your sister having a dysfunctional relationship with an alien, but nothing meaningful, that has an impact on the gameplay or the character dynamics. You end up jumping from one bounty to the next without any real narrative progression until pretty much the end. This flatly written progression is surprising given Justin Roiland's relationship with Dan Harmon and the established structure with which Dan Harmon writes his stories. I was hoping more cues would have been taken when writing the pacing. We got a story that feels like it had a lot more potential than what we ultimately got, and had it been left in the oven a bit longer, we might have had a very tightly written plot that moved along the game instead of being shot out of the sky only to be picked up later and dragged across the finish line. There were some bugs and glitches, an inconvenience but nothing game breaking. One encounter had an enemy with a shield that didn't follow him around as intended, so I had to run past the horde of enemies and break the shield that got stuck in the back first before I was able to continue. Reloading a checkpoint would usually resolve most of these issues. Given my thoughts on the impact each player's expectation will have on their experience, it is difficult to conclude on the game. However, a good benchmark is the trailer, as it really does give a very good idea of what the game has in store. If your interest was piqued, I would definitely recommend giving it a shot, as it is on Game Pass, making it almost a no-brainer if this is something you had your eye on. But if you're on the fence, I would rather give this one a skip.